All right, everyone, we got to talk about the Democratic Party. Of course, the midterm elections just barely beginning to be sort of talked about, hyped a little bit. You don't see much campaigning at the moment, but the generic ballot polling, a few state-to-state polls, really until summer, nobody's going to really care because it's a midterm. It's an off-year election. I've got to talk about this, though, because what I think is going to happen is that the Democrats end up with the mildest of victories in the House of Representatives. They're not going to retake the House. They'll just be gaining a few seats. It'll probably be underwhelming. Here's the problem. In any other situation, if you gain support within the House, you've got a few extra governors, you got some more state legislative positions, some, various things around the country. In any other situation, it's like, oh, well, that's great. Unfortunately, the Democrats, because of the paradigm shift, this is my prediction, need more than a mild victory. Looking at the generic ballot, the states that are up, the map, honestly, of where those races are. Trump's approval, the Democrat and Republican parties' general congressional approval. Looking at this, I don't see a situation that favors them to do more than put a very small dent, really, in Republican supremacy within government. The problem is that if you've spent a year saying the other party is essentially led by Hitler, and doesn't know what they're doing, they're evil. They're not only bigoted and all of these other epithets you can hurl at them, they are purely evil. If you've made that suggestion to your own partisan voters, we're talking just about partisan Democrats, people who would consider themselves liberal, they're never going to vote for a Republican anyway. They've been essentially told that the other side is demonic in nature. You would think then that they would get a little bit angry if the Democratic Party going into the midterms fails to do something a bit larger than, hey, we've got 3 or 4 extra House seats, we lost a Senate seat, but, we've got a little more support in the House and this governor flipped over. That's so underwhelming. And that would show really that Trump as a money president wins 2022. If after only the first half of his first term, he's managed to get the Democrats to the point where his own approval can be admittedly mediocre, and they can call him a bigot, say he's endangering the entire status of the United States, and he can still end up reigning over as the head de facto of this party. What essentially amounts to a Republican victory because they suppress their opponents despite them being favored heavily originally. The Democrats, even a couple months ago, were heavily, heavily favored to do great things. Now they've fallen flat. They've run out of money. They essentially destroyed their own capability to use immigration as a platform. They don't even talk about it at this point. They can't really cobble together a platform. The only thing I can even think of at this point that they can run on is, hey, Trump is a bigot, Trump is a bad person, and the Republicans enable him. It's not working. They've been trying that for a year. His support ekes up. Congressional ballot favoring Republicans now or very close to it. It's not going to work for their midterm campaigning. When that happens, when they don't really do anything during the midterms, when they've set themselves up to be a totally demoralized, almost minor party, simply because it's obvious that in a midterm that should have heavily favored them, all things considered, considering how the media acts, Trump not even having the will of some Republicans at first behind him, his support being, again, admittedly mediocre. If they can't even pull something more than the most mild of victories so-called out of their ass during such a midterm, what are they going to do during the general election when they have to face Trump himself? He's not in the running. And Trump is stronger than most Republicans. I can think of a few Republicans that are stronger than Trump, or would potentially be stronger. Rand Paul, I think, is probably the strongest. It's very, very difficult to actually go after him because he's got such a good reputation with groups that typically lean far blue, namely millennial voters. The youth likes him. Look, most of his support, early on the campaign, before Trump came in, he was the number 4 candidate. He was one of the upper crust candidates that was running in a packed field. He probably stood a chance of actually winning. Most of his supporters would have been the libertarian fringe, a lot of which ended up voting for Johnson, trust me, because they didn't like Trump. Libertarian fringe and young voters. This is exactly what the Republican Party needs to now target. They've got the blue-collar, sort of Rust Belt Union Democrats. They're on board with Trumpism. You branch out just a little bit further, get Rand to the fore, have him become a speaker for Trump in 2020, and he'll do great things. You won't have to worry about, Florida. You won't have to worry about. You'll probably take Virginia at that point. You can set up Rand to be the next presidential candidate. Really a favor. Also, if Trump ends up primary, it'll be absolutely hilarious because the libertarian part of the party will probably be the one supporting him the most, except on guns. On that, they're like, I'm not so sure at this point. No, Trump will do fine. The Republicans are slated to do fine. In fact, they might do better than I expected. It might be like 2016, where I said I expect Trump to win, but it's going to be, it's not going to be a landslide. It ended up being, in an electoral sense, a landslide for Trump. He crushed his opponent. That's because a couple states I didn't expect him to get, he actually got, including Wisconsin. That was really the big one there. And it was like people couldn't understand what was going on. It was almost like in the primaries. I got it wrong there. I thought that Cruz would lose in Wisconsin, but there was a hidden Cruz vote that had been fed by apparently their local conservative radio jockeys. Apparently radio's like, Wisconsin doesn't have cable, so radio's big there. And Trump is more of a cable style president / now big tech social media president. So I would say my expectation, if the midterms were held right now, the Democrats would gain 2 or 3 House seats, lose a couple Senate seats, and go home totally defeated. Like, the fact that they're likely to lose support in the Senate is going to be the big news of the day. The day after the midterm elections, even when they were up in the ballot, they were slated to lose a Senate seat. Not gain any. There's almost no possibility they can prevail in the Senate. I think they've even withdrawn from a few of the closer races there because they realize they just can't do it. They're focusing on the House. They want to gain, we can take back the House. I don't think they can. Let's say they do, though. Then you end up with split government. Trump's going to run roughshod over them. A lot of those Democrats will probably be Democrats that didn't piss off the Rust Belt voters. They're not going to want to go toe-to-toe with Trump. Or they'll be far left. They won't even work with the party. In fact, I'm going to give you a cautionary tale to you Democratic voters. If you're helping them win the House, you should hope that they lose seats in the House, that they get totally crushed so that the paradigm shift can finally flip. They can stop edging themselves, blow their load at the proper time, and reform as a party, get a candidate and a platform that actually makes sense. Then they stand a chance in 2020 because they'll leave behind the 90s style campaign and issue platforms that they've been using that Clinton lost off. That Clinton lost on, and whatever candidate's next, a neoliberal, it would be a Biden or somebody, will lose on. They will lose. They keep saying, these three black women can beat Donald Trump. And they're like Oprah, Kamala Harris. That's not the way to win an election. It's not going to happen. I'm sorry, but when you play identity politics, you actually play right into Trump's hands. He's already built the upper hand on that. You can't win against him. You need something more tangible. He's won on money. He's won on the social wedge issues. That much is clear. Find something else to run on. What's it going to be? We have a better plan. You can win the union voters back. The Democrats can. They just don't seem interested in doing so. They're like, but most of them are white, so they're dying off, or so we don't even care. That's not the way to win. Look, you're losing support with Hispanic voters. Trump got a couple points above Romney on that, despite the fact that you called him Adolf Hitler. And said, he hates Mexicans. He thinks that they're all criminals. He hates Hispanic people. And yet a lot of them he hates women. He's a womanizer, and yet he wins with the female vote too. And there's a reason for that. The Democrats have been left behind in La La Land, where their wedge issues still make sense in the cable days of the 1990s, when a few dozen very centralized media sites, essentially, a few, basically Drudge as the first sort of on-the-web only site, a few of the bigger newsprint, a few of the bigger radio conglomerates, and then cable, basically. They're used to only having to wine and dine a few journalists and pundits and shake their hands, say how great they are, give them an exclusive interview to get favorable coverage. Now they're running against tens of thousands of online commentators who collectively have a hell of a lot more of an audience than all of the radio and newsprint personalities combined. We are bigger at this point than both radio and news combined. We're getting to the point where you could throw cable in there and we'd still be larger. Good luck. You're going to need to go, pro-free speech on the net. We're giving up, the racial wedge issue. It's obviously no longer working. We can't run on, hey, let's break the glass ceiling, because it makes you look like pandering fools. It makes you look like you're still stuck in the 90s, back when having a feel-good post-hippie message won you an election. It no longer does. People see through it because they can look at your record online. They can search for it themselves. They don't need a pundit to do it. And then say, Hillary Clinton is running on the glass ceiling platform, but look, here's a video clip from the 90s of her insulting and calling a woman loose moral, basically, for saying that Bill touched her inappropriately. See, it doesn't work. It never will work. Meanwhile, Trump, he proudly puts out the somewhat sexist, brash, weird side of him, because he's done it for years and he doesn't even care. He comes out and owns it happily and says, "Oh yeah, I'm Donald Trump. Of course, I can do what I want." You can't win against Trump playing Trump's game. The Democrats, very stupidly, think that they can. They tried it in 2016. It didn't work. They're going to try it, it looks like, again in the midterms. It's not going to work. It's just not going to work. Maybe that if they lose handily enough, they reform as a party, then in 2020 they stand a chance because they get a candidate who isn't like a Hillary Clinton. They get a candidate who makes sense. Oh yeah, I don't want to raise your taxes, and no, I'm not going to run on the males are all sexist and evil, I'm going to dye my hair pink platform. Okay, well then maybe you prevail. You're still going to have ideas of your own. They can't just be refuting the outdated old neoliberal Democrats. Also, what are you going to do about cash? The Democratic lay people aren't donating to you. They don't see a compelling reason to. I think they see that Trump didn't solicit corporate donations. So they're not going to like if the Democrats become again the party of corporate donors, midterm or 2020. That's going to give Trump a huge advantage. That just ties him in more with being a money president. Oh, he'll steamroll you. He'll definitely win if the Democrats do that. So they got to turn to grassroots support or self-funding. They may end up having no choice but to front they might end up having no choice but to have like a Mark Cuban, someone who can self-fund, someone with billions of dollars. Oh yeah, here's Bill Gates running for the presidency. Here's Mark Zuckerberg. He'll be the first robot president. The first semi-passable Generation 2.5 synth. That would be really fucking funny. By the way, look that up. the Gen 2 synths on Fallout look an awful lot like Mark Zuckerberg. I'm sorry, I think he rubs too many people the wrong way to ever run for substantial office outside of maybe California. That's about all. Peace out.